The desperate arrival. The night was dark, the sky full of distant stars, but there was something different in the air tonight. The wind was colder, and the world felt still. On the outskirts of a small town, a lonely house stood, its porch light casting a soft glow onto the gravel road. Inside, the house was quiet, almost too quiet. A man sat by his window, lost in thought. Life hadn't been easy for him lately. He had a routine, a simple life, and it was starting to feel like the world was passing him by. But that night things were about to change. A faint sound broke the silence, a soft, almost inaudible cry. The man's eyes snapped to the window. His curiosity piqued. His hand hovered over the door handle, unsure of what he might find. He opened it cautiously, the cool air rushing in. The cry became louder, and as his eyes adjusted to the dark, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. There, on the doorstep, was a small figure. At first he thought it was a bundle of clothes, but as he stepped closer, he saw the tiny hands and the glowing eyes. A baby. But this was no ordinary baby. It wasn't human. The creature was small, with smooth grayish skin that shimmered faintly under the porch light. Its eyes were large, unlike anything he had ever seen. It had delicate features, and its tiny chest rose and fell with each weak breath. The baby was wrapped in what looked like an alien fabric, torn and dirty from travel. The man's mind raced. Where had it come from? Who would leave a child like this on his doorstep? The baby let out another soft cry, its tiny hands reaching out as if searching for someone. The man's heart clenched. He couldn't just leave it there. Whatever it was in need of help, and the man's instincts kicked in. He bent down, slowly, not sure whether he should touch it or not. But the child's eyes, those strange large eyes, looked up at him, filled with trust and fear all at once. The man's hesitation melted away, and he gently scooped the baby into his arms. The baby was cold, its skin smooth but unnatural to the touch. It shivered slightly as if it had been abandoned for far too long. He noticed that the baby's little chest was rising and falling rapidly, each breath more labored than the last. It needed warmth. It needed care. He didn't know what it was, but it was in his arms now. And in that moment, it was his responsibility. He looked around. The night was silent, empty, and there was no sign of whoever had left the child. The wind picked up again, but this time it felt colder, as if it was warning him. The man's mind raced, but his heart told him one thing. He couldn't turn away. He turned and walked back into his house, the baby still nestled in his arms. Inside, he placed the small creature on his couch, wrapping it in a blanket he had lying around. As he looked at the baby, questions filled his mind. Where had it come from? Why was it alone? But one thing was clear. This baby, this strange, helpless creature needed him, and he would protect it. Little did he know this was only the beginning. The night was not as quiet as it seemed, and the baby's arrival would soon set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. But for now, all the man could do was sit beside the child and wonder, what on earth or anywhere am I supposed to do now? The stranger's burden. The man stood frozen in the doorway, his hand still gripping the handle as if unsure whether to go back inside or leave it all behind. The baby in his arms, small and fragile, felt both alien and impossibly real. He glanced around nervously, but there was no one. No sign of anyone watching. The street was as quiet as ever. Just the faint rustling of the wind. Where did you come from? He whispered under his breath. The words felt hollow as they hung in the air. He could hardly believe what was happening. This wasn't supposed to be his reality. Inside, the warmth of the house seemed too comfortable for such an extraordinary thing to happen. The world outside felt distant and cold. He carried the baby over to the living room, gently placing it down on the couch. It let out another soft cry, its tiny body trembling with each labored breath. The man's heart ached. He couldn't leave it like this. He was no doctor, no expert in anything remotely like this. He was just a regular man with an ordinary life. But in that moment, it didn't matter. The baby's strange eyes locked onto him as if it knew he was its only hope. He tried not to be disturbed by how knowing those eyes were. They were too human for something so different. The baby was looking at him with a quiet desperation, its tiny hands reaching up as though it could somehow pull the answers out of him. He hesitated, then stood up quickly, pacing the room. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, fingers shaking, but then stopped. He couldn't just call the cops, could he? Who would believe him? Who would believe that an alien baby just landed on his doorstep? What would they do? He didn't even know what kind of help he was supposed to be asking for. He needed to think, but all the thoughts jumbled in his mind. The baby's eyes glimmered again in the dim light, almost glowing, and it made him pause. Okay, he muttered to himself, the decision forming. I'll figure this out, but how? He turned his attention back to the child, who was now quiet, its wide, glowing eyes never leaving him. There was an odd silence between them, a strange understanding passing between the two. The man wasn't sure if it was the baby's gaze or the instinct inside him, but he knew that he couldn't just leave it to figure this out alone. The baby shifted slightly, and suddenly, the man's gaze fell on something even more bizarre. The small, almost invisible markings running along its arms. Thin, faint patterns that seemed to pulse, glowing faintly like bioluminescence. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, wondering if he was seeing things, but they were still there. His mind raced again, this time asking the questions that felt more dangerous. What was this baby? Where did it come from? Why was it left with him? Before he could answer himself, a distant sound echoed from the porch. Soft scraping noise like something brushing against the doorframe. The man froze, holding his breath, his eyes darting toward the entrance. Was someone else out there? Had someone been watching him? He moved cautiously toward the door, his mind filled with fear and confusion. As he reached for the handle, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, faint but deliberate, made his heart beat faster. His hand hesitated on the knob. The wind howled outside as the sound grew louder. Who could it be? And why was everything suddenly feeling off? The alien mother's watchful eyes. The man couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there. His heart thudded in his chest, his fingers cold against the doorknob. Slowly, he turned it and cracked the door open, just enough to peer outside. The night was still. Nothing. The streetlights flickered faintly, casting long shadows along the empty road. No footsteps, no signs of movement. But something gnawed at him. A strange sensation, a chill running down his spine, as if he were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder at the baby, still lying quietly on the couch. Its eyes were wide and observant, more aware than any child had a right to be. The man swallowed hard, trying to shake off the creeping unease. He closed the door and locked it, taking a deep breath. It wasn't like he could just leave the baby outside. He had to stay calm, had to take control. Yet the truth was, the longer he looked at the child, the more uneasy he felt. There was something about those eyes, something otherworldly. They seemed to pierce right through him, reading his every thought. Was it possible? Was this really happening? The man paced across the living room, his thoughts tangled. He needed to know what to do. But as he reached for his phone again, a faint whisper interrupted his concentration. Don't leave. The voice wasn't his own. It wasn't even human. He whipped his head around, his pulse quickening. But the source of the whisper didn't reveal itself. The baby. It had made no sound, but its gaze had changed. The calm, innocent expression was gone, replaced with something deeper, an emotion the man couldn't quite place. The baby was waiting for him to understand something hidden behind its glowing eyes. Just as quickly as the whisper had come, it faded, leaving the man with more questions than answers. Had he imagined it? Was it a trick of his tired mind? Or was this creature truly communicating with him in some way? Suddenly, There was a soft knock on the window behind him. The man froze, his breath catching in his throat. He turned slowly, but there was nothing. Nothing but the reflection of his own wide-eyed face staring back at him. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. But then, through the dim reflection, he saw it. A shadow moved just outside the window, a dark figure standing at the edge of the porch, barely visible against the night. It wasn't human. The figure was tall and thin, its features obscured by the darkness. Its skin shimmered with an eerie, pale glow, similar to the baby's. For a moment, the man thought his heart would stop. The shadow didn't move, but its presence was undeniable. He knew this wasn't just some random passerby. This was someone, or something, looking for answers. His first instinct was to lock the window, hide, and call for help. But something inside him held him back. What if this was connected to the baby? What if this was a part of whatever strange fate had brought the child to his doorstep? Before he could make a decision, the figure disappeared into the night. But the feeling of being watched lingered, even more intense than before. He could almost hear the pulse of his own heartbeat, drowning out the quiet night. The man turned back to the baby, whose eyes were now shut, its tiny chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. But something had changed. A sense of calm had replaced the tension that filled the room moments before. It was as if the baby knew that whatever had just happened, whatever had watched them both from the shadows, wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The man stood frozen, staring at the child, wondering if he had just stepped into something he couldn't escape. He had already made a choice. He had taken the baby in, and now there was no going back. Whatever was waiting for him, he was in it now, and he was no longer alone. The unseen connection, the days blurred together, each one passing with a strange, quiet intensity. The man had expected things to settle down after the baby arrived, but instead the house seemed to grow heavier with every passing hour. The child, small and fragile as it was, had become a presence in the man's life, something that clung to him like a shadow that never quite left. At first, the baby had been completely silent, but as the days passed, the little one started making sounds, soft coos, gentle murmurs in the middle of the night that seemed to pull the man from his sleep. But it wasn't just the sounds, it was the feeling, a strange invisible thread that connected the two of them, something the man couldn't explain, but he felt it. Sometimes, when he looked at the baby, it was as though the child was looking back into his soul, reading his thoughts as easily as he read a book. The man's hands trembled one morning as he carefully prepared a bottle of warm milk. The baby, whom he had begun to call Xylor, a name that felt both foreign and somehow fitting, watched him intently. Its dark, shimmering eyes never left his face. It was as though it understood what he was doing, as though it knew what came next. The baby's gaze was unnerving, but not in a way that made him afraid. No, this was different. This was a kind of intimacy that stretched beyond anything he could have imagined. As he fed the baby, something unexpected happened. A soft hum vibrated in the air, barely audible, but the man could feel it deep in his chest. The hum wasn't coming from any appliance or object in the house. It seemed to emanate from Xylor itself. The man paused, unsure if he was hearing things. But then, the hum turned into a whisper, barely more than a breath against his ear. "Help. Me." The words didn't seem to come from anywhere, and yet they filled the air around him. The man nearly dropped the bottle. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked down at the baby, who was now staring up at him, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the kitchen. "Did you—" he started, his voice shaky. The baby blinked, and the hum faded away. Silence fell again, but the atmosphere was thick, charged with something that made the man's skin crawl and tingle at the same time. What was that? He sat back down, trying to shake off the overwhelming sensation. He had no explanation for what just happened. Could the baby be talking to him? He had seen it do strange things, yes, its eyes glowed. It had seemed aware of things no infant should understand. But this? A whisper? A plea for help? Xyler reached out for him, its tiny hands grasping at the air, as if trying to pull him closer. The man hesitated for a moment but then gently scooped the baby up, holding it close to his chest. "You're safe here," he said quietly, even though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince more, Xyler or himself. But the baby's gaze never wavered. It was searching, always searching. The way it looked at him made it clear that this was more than a simple rescue. There was something the baby needed him to do. There was something he was supposed to understand, something deeper than the simple task of keeping it fed and warm. And then, as if in response to his unspoken question, the baby's voice whispered again, clearer this time, inside his head. "They will come for me. You must protect me." The words weren't spoken aloud, but they reverberated through the man's mind. His pulse quickened as the weight of the words settled on his shoulders. Protect it? From what? The feeling of the baby's gaze, heavy with unspoken knowledge, made him wonder just how much it truly understood. And yet, no matter how much he wanted to believe that he could keep it safe, a part of him, deep down, was starting to realize that he wasn't the one in control here. There was something much bigger at play, something far beyond him and far beyond anything he could have prepared for. Suddenly the doorbell rang. The man stiffened, his breath caught in his throat. The sound felt like a sudden crack in the fragile silence that had settled over the house. Who could it be? A cold chill ran through him. He wasn't sure if it was the baby's strange warning or just the feeling that whatever was coming now was going to change everything. A warning from the past. The man stood frozen, staring at the tosser, his hand still hovering above the handle. The ring of the doorbell felt more like an omen than a simple visitor. Who could be out there? No one had come by in days, and the neighborhood was usually quiet. But now, there was something about the moment that felt wrong. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy he couldn't quite place. He looked down at Xylor, still cradled in his arms, its glowing eyes wide and alert. It had stopped making any noise, but the way it was staring at the door sent a chill down his spine. There was no mistaking it. The baby knew. The man's fingers shook as he reached for the door, his mind racing. What was happening? He swung the door open, and there, standing on the porch, was a figure cloaked in a long, dark robe. The hood was drawn low, casting their face in shadow. But even in the dim light, the man could see the faint glow of their skin, the same eerie luminescence that mirrored Xyler's. "Who are you?" the man demanded, his voice shaky but firm. He stepped back, instinctively clutching Xylor closer to his chest. Something about the stranger felt ancient, wrong, yet oddly familiar. The figure didn't speak at first. Instead, they looked past the man, their gaze fixed on Xylor. The baby in his arms stiffened, its little body trembling slightly, as if recognizing the presence before even the man did. The silence between them stretched for a long, tense moment before the stranger spoke, their voice low and deep, filled with an otherworldly resonance that seemed to vibrate through the air. "You don't know what you've done, human." The words were calm, but they were laced with a quiet, dangerous authority. The man felt his blood run cold. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared for any of this. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice faltering. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The figure raised a hand, gesturing for him to listen. The man, despite the panic rising in his chest, forced himself to stay still, to stay calm. The figure's words hit him like a slap in the face. "This child is no ordinary creature." The stranger's voice was filled with sorrow, as though delivering bad news. "It is the last of a dying race, the last hope for my people." The words hit the man like a wave, his mind struggling to comprehend. What? What do you mean, the last hope? He shook his head, trying to make sense of it. "But it's just a baby. What do you want with it?" The figure stepped closer, their movements slow but deliberate. With each step, the air seemed to grow colder, more oppressive. They finally spoke again, their voice grave. "The child you hold is the key to a power that could change everything. My people, we were once mighty, masters of the stars, but we are fading. We are dying. Their eyes locked onto the baby, and the man felt a weight pressing on his chest as if the very words were pushing against him, trying to pull him into something he wasn't ready for. Xyler, or whatever name you have given it, is not what it seems. It has the potential to awaken a force that could either rebuild our world or destroy it entirely. The stranger's voice dropped to a whisper. And those who seek to stop it will do anything to get to it. They will come, and you will be caught in the crossfire. The man's mind was racing, everything was spinning. The baby he had been taking care of, the one who had looked to him for protection, was somehow the last hope of a race he couldn't even begin to understand. And what do you want me to do? The words left his mouth before he could think. His hands were sweaty, his heart pounding in his ears. The figure didn't move, but their eyes softened just a little. You must protect it. Protect Xyler from those who would see it destroyed. You cannot trust anyone, not even your own kind. The time is near. The man's head was spinning, and for the first time since Xyler arrived, a sense of dread settled over him. The weight of the words, the warning that things were about to escalate beyond his control, made his knees feel weak. Who could he trust? What did he even know about the world he thought he understood? You can't just leave, the man stammered, his voice breaking. What happens if I don't protect it? What's coming after it? The figure's eyes darkened, their expression unreadable. What's coming is already here. They turned away, their movements swift and silent. Be ready. And just like that, the figure vanished into the night, leaving the man standing in the doorway, his mind a storm of confusion and fear. The air felt colder now, and though the stranger was gone, the tension remained, hanging heavy in the man's chest. What had he just heard? What was he supposed to do with this information? Xyler's tiny hand reached up from his arms, grasping at his shirt as if pulling him out of his thoughts. The baby's wide eyes, filled with more knowledge than any child should, have locked onto his, and in that moment, the man understood. The time to protect it was now. And whatever it was that was coming, he had no choice but to be ready. The alien threat. The night felt different now, as if the earth itself had shifted beneath the man's feet. The stranger's warning echoed in his mind, each word more chilling than the last. Be ready. But what did that mean? Ready for what? How could he protect something as mysterious and powerful as Xyler? The baby was still small, fragile even. How could it possibly be the key to anything, let alone something as enormous as saving or destroying entire worlds? The house was quiet again. Too quiet. But the man's sense of peace had shattered, replaced, with a growing unease that gnawed at him. He looked down at Xyler, whose large eyes were closed now, but there was something unsettling about the way the child slept. It wasn't natural. It wasn't like the sleep of a regular infant. It was too still, too deliberate, as if the baby was waiting for something. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. Whatever was going on, he couldn't let fear paralyze him. He had to figure this out. He was responsible for Xyler now, and if what that figure said was true, then that responsibility was far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. Just then, a sudden noise interrupted his thoughts, a low, distant hum. It wasn't the usual hum of the refrigerator or the faint buzz of the streetlights outside. No, this sound was different. It felt like the ground beneath his feet was vibrating slightly, like a warning shot through the air. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint energy. The hum grew louder, sharper. He rushed to the window, heart pounding. Outside, the night had transformed. The stars seemed dimmer, like they were being smothered by a growing darkness. And then, there, in the distance, he saw it. A small light, far away at first, but growing closer and fast. The light flickered, turning into several lights, flickering in and out like a swarm of fireflies, but they were moving too rapidly, too erratically to be natural. The hum intensified. Then, from the shadows, he saw something emerge, an imposing figure towering and silent. Its form was barely distinguishable, cloaked in the blackness of the night, but its presence was undeniable. There was a palpable tension in the air, like the pressure just before a thunderstorm breaks. And that feeling, the feeling of being hunted, swept over him like a cold wave. Xyler stirred in his arms, its tiny body quivering, and for the first time since the baby had come into his care, he felt a deep fear, not for himself, but for the child. They were here. The man turned, panic rising in his chest. He wanted to run, to escape, but there was no place to hide. Not from this. There was nowhere that could shield him from whatever was coming for Xyler. The baby's power, the alien heritage that had once seemed so distant, was real now. It was why the figure had warned him. And now, the truth was coming for him. For the baby. Xyler's eyes opened wide, glowing faintly, and the man could feel the air grow heavier with each passing second. The child seemed to sense what was happening too. Xyler let out a soft, eerie sound. Something that wasn't quite a cry but more of a low, almost musical hum. The man glanced back at the door. He could hear the soft shuffling of footsteps drawing nearer. They weren't human, not even close. The hum outside had stopped, and in its place was an eerie silence. No more noises, no more warnings. Just that feeling, the undeniable suffocating feeling of being watched, of being surrounded. Suddenly the door burst open. A cold wind swept into the house, and standing in the doorway was another figure. This one was different from the first, though no less intimidating. The figure was dressed in armor made of a strange metallic material that seemed to shimmer and pulse in the dim light. Its face was obscured by a dark helmet, but its presence was terrifying. The air around it was charged with a cold energy, like the creature was made of the very night itself. The man's breath hitched. This was no longer a warning. The figure spoke, its voice cold and smooth, cutting through the silence like a blade. "We've come for the child." The words hung in the air like a sentence, final and unyielding. The man backed away instinctively, clutching Xyler tighter. "No," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I won't let you take it." The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. "You are a fool, human." The voice was filled with a quiet, cruel amusement. "You have no idea what you are protecting. That child, it belongs to us." The man felt the weight of the words settle over him, crushing the air out of his lungs. He didn't know who these creatures were, but they were coming for Xyler, and they weren't here to ask for permission. But Xyler wasn't just a baby anymore. The man could feel it, the change, the shift. The baby's eyes flickered, glowing, brighter than before. There was something inside of Xyler awakening, something ancient, something powerful. And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the future of worlds. The final decision. The weight of the world hung heavy in the air. The armored figure stood in the doorway, unmoving, as the man gripped Xyler tighter, the child's small form trembling against his chest. The room was filled with an electric charge, the tension palpable as if every heartbeat amplified the pressure of what was to come. Xyler's eyes glowed even brighter now, the flicker of something ancient and untamed pulsing beneath its surface. The man could feel it, the raw power emanating from the baby vibrating through his fingertips. It was no longer just a child. It was a weapon, a force far beyond anything he had ever encountered. The figure took a slow step forward, its boots echoing on the floor like the ticking of a clock counting down to an inevitable end. The man's instincts screamed at him to run, to hide, to do anything, but the truth was unavoidable. There was no escaping what was coming. The stranger's cold voice broke the silence again, a cruel certainty in every word. "You don't understand. Human. You're playing with forces you can't comprehend." The man swallowed hard, his pulse racing. He wanted to speak, to argue, but his mind was a storm of confusion. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. Not when Zyler's life, and possibly the fate of everything, was in his hands. The choice had already been made, but he could feel the enormity of it like a weight pressing against his chest. The figure took another step forward, its presence overwhelming, its voice now a chilling whisper. This child's existence is an anomaly. We will correct it. And in that moment, everything inside the man snapped into focus. No matter what they said, no matter what they wanted, Zyler was not theirs to take. It wasn't just about the alien child. It was about something far more primal. About protection. About defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. The man had become something more than just an observer. He had become Zyler's protector, the one who would stand between the child and the darkness that sought to claim it. The man stepped forward, meeting the cold gaze of the figure. He didn't back down. "You're wrong," he said, his voice stronger than it had ever been. "This child doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the future, a future we both have to decide." Zyler's eyes flickered once more, the glow intensifying, and for a brief moment, the air itself seemed to hum with an ancient energy. The child's tiny hand reached out, fingers curling as if grasping at the very fabric of the universe. The figure paused, its expression unreadable, and for a split second, there was a flicker of something, uncertainty perhaps, in the cold eyes behind the helmet. It seemed to hesitate just for a heartbeat before it spoke again, this time with an edge of frustration creeping into its tone. "You think you can protect it? You don't know what you're up against." But the man didn't flinch. He knew the truth now. No matter how powerful these beings were, no matter how much knowledge they held, they couldn't understand the one thing that made him human: his will. "I don't need to know everything," the man replied, his voice firm, unwavering. "I just need to know what's right." There was a long pause. The silence stretched between them like an invisible thread, taut and fragile. And then, without warning, the baby, Zyler, glowed brighter than ever before, a burst of light so intense it flooded the room, casting shadows on every wall. The air crackled, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, everything seemed to pause. Zyler's tiny form hovered in the air, glowing with the raw energy of a power far beyond anything the man could have imagined. The figure's stance shifted, its armor vibrating, and for a fraction of a second the man thought it might attack, but then the figure stopped. The energy in the room seemed to shift, and Zyler's light slowly dimmed, returning to its normal but still intense glow. "So it is true," the figure said, its voice softer now, almost reluctant. "The child is the key. The future is not as simple as we thought." The man didn't move, his grip on Zyler still tight. This wasn't a victory, not yet. But he knew one thing now. He had control of this moment. "No one is going to take it from me." He spoke with the certainty of someone who had nothing left to lose. "If there's a future for this world for all of us, then I'm going to fight for it. And I'm going to fight for Zyler." The figure stood there for a long moment as if weighing his words. And then, with a reluctant nod, it stepped back, raising one hand in a gesture of silent acknowledgement. "We will be watching. The battle is not over. But you are not alone in this." The figure turned slowly, disappearing into the shadows as the door slammed shut behind it.